I'm so excited to hopefully share something that's of meaning to everybody listening. So, g'day everybody out there listening today.
Amen to that. And look, I've read your book.
Yay!
It's an engaging and a good read. I have to declare an interest, though. I do like the Stoics. I find Stoic arguments compelling, and I agree with them much more than I don't. But my opening question is like, what led you into this? Like, what did you need to write a book about reclaiming power and Stoicism?
Um, that's a really good question, and I'm glad it's a podcast, which means we've got enough time to explain it. So I've been on a journey now, probably since I was 18 or 19. Um, and that journey has taken me many different paths and many different ways. It culminated a couple of years ago with writing the book. But what I've been doing to get there, well, the catalyst for writing it, and this is kind of like a lot of fun how this sort of came about. Please excuse any noise you can hear in the background. The kids are having a bit of a go on their tablet today. Um, the story around why this happened, I started doing a mentoring program with a guy from the States who I don't know if anyone will have heard of him. They may have. His name's Joel Bauer. I'm always happy to mention people who I've learned stuff from because, hey, I didn't make it all up. And he, fascinating guy. He'd been behind the launching of some of the biggest names you'll ever hear in self-improvement in the US, including, Tony Robbins, people like that. But it's been around forever. And his mentoring program is a really, I thought, quite cost effective. And he gets to a point in the program where he says, now you've got to write your book. And I was getting ready to write it. I'd already had developed some other products. I've got an online mentoring program with Zoom calls. It's about 10 modules and stuff. So I basically took that and turned it into a book, if you like. And I've been presenting by that stage for over 20 years, plus all the life experiences and everything else. But the catalyst was I had to sell, I was in the process of selling a property in WA, which we made a loss on. And I just called the bank. I said, hey, look, just ring in as a courtesy. We're about to sell this property and we're going to come up a bit short. So we're going to need to have to use the lender's mortgage insurance. And so the bank took all the money. They took all the money we had in our bank account. And then they lied about who took it. They claimed that the LMI provider had taken the money. And they had taken some of it, but this LMI provider had taken the rest. And I contacted the LMI provider and they said, no, they hadn't. And so this went on back and forth. And I decided to give the banks hell and went to the Financial Complaints Authority and really did everything I could. And so within a week, got the money back. It wasn't the point. But the thing that made it the catalyst was it was such a stressful event to have all your savings at that point just stripped out of your bank account that I decided, stuff it. I've been dancing around this for a week or two. That was time to write the book. I'm just going to nut it out and sit down for the next month and finish it. And because I didn't want myself or my family to ever get into a situation again where such a comparatively small, pardon me, amount of money would cause me or us that much stress. And I went, the book could do that. The book could then be like a pillar or a cornerstone for what I'm building out my business as a presenter, and despite having been presenting for as long as I have. But the book was a real foot in the sand, if you like. And I guess the message and everything that goes along with that too kind of adds flavor to that. And so that was my inspiring point. Every day I just sat there and wrote and wrote and wrote till I couldn't write anymore, and come back the next day, try to make sense of the day previously and just keep going. And that's, thankfully, it didn't take more than a month to write the first part of it. Yeah, the first stab at it, if you like.
Well, it's kind of amazing, really, when you think about it, just because we take our lifestyles and the security blanket around us created by society kind of like for granted. And society giveth, society taketh away. You can literally, and it's not the first time I've heard a story like that, although I got to say that's one of the highest resolution ones, where people just wake up and it's like, everything I have and I've worked for is gone. And it seems kind of arbitrary. And it seems kind of like, how did this happen? Like that would be, I would imagine, like a kind of world shifting event in your head, and the amount of stress that would cause, especially being a, provider and all that kind of stuff. It's just like,
yeah, indeed. And I think to the strength of what you just said also, I think it's different for a lot of veterans. You have this because especially if you've been fortunate or unfortunate, as the case may be, to have served overseas or even to have been to a war zone, you kind of understand that how fragile life really is and how lucky we have it. Whereas a lot of people live in a bit of a bubble and think that no, everything's going to be okay until it isn't one day, God forbid. But yeah, you've really got to come from that space of I've got to do everything I can. And so
Absolutely. So tell us about your, you've mentioned you're a veteran. Tell us about your Army career, and tell us about how that shaped your worldview, and how it impacted on the book.
I have the great privilege of being accused or complimented, depending on which way you want to call it, from one of my mates who was a sergeant at the time, who told me once, "You are the most non-army person here." And I'm very proud of that because I was determined. As like, one of the things I've observed in myself, and introspection is, I'm going to talk a lot about introspection on and off throughout our chat today, because it's always been such a considerable driving, useful tool that I've always reflected on. But when I consider things that have occurred in my life, I can recall a time when I was very impressionable. And if there's one thing and I only recently did a values questionnaire and feedback piece with this new contract I'm working with, because I'm very blessed to be working with a real guru in a lot of ways, in a lot of these values and different management theories. So he's given me some stuff he's putting me through. And the driving value above everything else was to be who I am, to be myself. To in all situations, one of my strongest values is to try to be who I think I am or who comes across. And it calls you authentic. And I don't even like the term. I'm a bit old school. I like the term genuine, because people used to know what that meant. Authentic to me was Chinese food in the 80s. But and authentic is such an ambiguous term. Oh, you're authentic. That could mean bloody anything. But people knew what genuine meant. And so that's a bit of a driver. And that's something that I try to be who I am. And when I went full time, okay, so I started in the reserves in the 90s, the very late 90s and late 20s, I joined. But then got through, and I'll share a bit about what happened there. But then I got out, had a couple of years in what I like to call the wilderness, and then went full time at 33. So by the time I went full time at 33, irrespective of all the things I knew the military would hopefully help me to do and take me away from a life that I wasn't particularly happy with, I was determined to let it add the things and help develop the things within me that I needed, but it wasn't going to take away from me who I was. And that was one thing that was definitely, it was like my line in the sand, I suppose. So started as a reservist in Sydney. I'd had a couple of mates, one of whom you could watch the tale of his demise in one of the Underbelly series that was on many years ago, Underbelly Badness. He was these two blokes who I won't name, one of whom they were both best mates, and they'd both served at one commando company in the Army Reserves, and their stories just switched me on and talked to me. And I joined at Sydney University Regiment as a digger, just to make sure I wasn't going to waste anyone's time, that I liked the Army. No point getting there and going, oh, don't like going bush and having a sook, and that's probably not going to work out well if you're trying to get into a unit like One Commando was at the time. So I did a bit of reserve time first, got to understand the game a little bit, then made an attempt, went across to One Commando, made an attempt at selection in 2000 with really small amount of experience up against seasoned professionals. Didn't pass the first time. I'm always happy to say I'm the most non-natural soldier you'll ever meet. I was just stubborn and really enjoyed it. And a glutton for punishment, of course, as well. And then had a second attempt later that year and passed, but almost failed the second time. I came close. And then I hung around at One Commando for a couple of years, and then my reserve career came to an end for a number of reasons. And then I always missed it and always lamented the fact that I didn't go to East Timor with 4RAR, because that was 4RAR was raising the commando capability back in those days. And having just passed the regular Army selection, that was the next thing. They said, "Oh, you interested in going to East Timor?" And I somehow in my civilian mind thought I knew better, and it turned out later that I didn't really. So despite the opportunities I achieved or had come my way the year that 4RAR did go to East Timor, which really set me up. And then some years later, I went, no, I've really got to give this regular Army a go, and even just for a short, 4-year, 6-year contract, and give it my best. And I came out of it 7.5 years after I signed up full time, with some of the usual injuries and so forth, but certainly had a hell of a life and experience over that time. And it was transformative in many, many ways. I won't sugarcoat it. There were some challenges. And I did experience a lot of unfortunate things, not the least of which was bullying, loss of mates on the battlefield and that kind of stuff, which isn't great. It was actually, probably some of the more traumatic things. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think that it's really helped to make me the person that I am today.
That's been a consistent theme, and it's strange because last week's interview was with a person who, well, two people actually who went through some really serious diseases that were debilitating and that are going to ultimately is going to cause the death of one person. I asked this lady, she suffers from moyamoya disease, and as part of the treatment, they literally drill in, like, there are holes in her head like this, like drilled in her head. So one of the questions I asked was like, okay, comparing the suffering to the insight, because, she was talking about the insights that she's gained from the disease, from her having to go through it, the friend, going, even the treatment, all that kind of stuff. So was it worth it? And she went, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, don't get me wrong. I wish I could have had those insights without the suffering, but you just cannot make the separation. You have to suffer to get that insight. And it was totally worth it. And even considering that in the long run, this disease is going to kill me, it's like, yeah, I would not have the disease. And I near fell off my chair. It's like you can't like think of that. But that's
pretty big, mate.
Really consistent thing, though. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. It's a different form of suffering, and it's in a different area. But I think the experience is comparable. That I'm really seeing this thing that suffering is important because it teaches us stuff, and considering how, as a society, like, we're really risk adverse. As much as we Australians see ourselves as a can-do kind of bullshit.
Yeah,
we are a risk adverse, wimpy bunch of people. We really are. And I don't mean that like I'm an Australian, you're an Australian. It's just the way we are.
Yeah. Happy Australia Day for
yeah, happy Australia. Yeah, that's exactly right. But so, going through, we need to go through this suffering. We need to go through a bit of privation to make us better people. It's such a strange thing.
I think so. And my first experience of that was in my 20s when my mother passed away. She died of cancer. She fought it for 12 years, and the last 9-10 months, maybe, we knew that she was going to die. Like, we knew that this was the end, and in fairly short order. And I went through emotionally, as you'd expect, a lot of things with that. But I came out the other side feeling incredibly gifted from having had that experience at a reasonably young age. So, yeah, suffering has its benefits.
Yeah, strange but true. Now, what is it about Stoicism that really appeals to you?
Facing up to things. Facing up to things. Nothing goes away by ignoring it. It only gets worse. And if you look at your life, and I reflect on my life in high school and all the other times in my life when I've had bullies in my life, if I didn't face up to them, even if I lost, even if I had to give up something in the process, which I didn't want to give up, or I had to take a hit because of standing up for what I believed in, I dealt with it, and it typically went away. And I think what happens over time, and I could reflect on all the times I've been bullied in my life, and people often laugh. They go, I'm 110 kilos and 192 centimeters. People go, how the hell would somebody bully you? I go, well, it may surprise you. It's not, as you know, it's not always physical, because I kind of wish it would be sometimes, because then it might be a different game. But always facing up to it. That's probably one of the most repeatable, recognizable hardships that I'm sure a lot of people have suffered from in some form or other. If you face up to it, if you take the hit, or you're prepared to dish it out back, or whatever your mechanism of coping, you need to face up to it at some point. And Stoicism provides a model for doing that. In fact, it validates facing up and standing up to your problems in order to make the situation better. And for my money, it's been around over 2,000 years. Nothing else stacks up. I mean, I like other philosophies, don't get me wrong, and I like other methods of doing things, but the Stoics were just, they look, I came across an old form of psychotherapy that was introduced into the world, which no doubt we'll talk about, but in the 50s as a philosophy of living. It just so happened that it had a really good application for therapy and helping people overcome what was troubling them. And that just speaks to me, and it still does to this day. And I align so closely with it, and every time I get a chance to teach it or share it with the group, and it's always in the hope that somebody will walk away with some seed that's going to help to change their lives, as it has for me.
Absolutely. And just introducing people to the concept of like these Stoics. Yeah, I've heard about it. Maybe I need to, understand a little bit more about it so it gets people into it. But you quote Epictetus, Epictetus, Epictetus.
There's about 3 ways to say it. But
Yeah, Epictetus, I'm pretty sure is the least incorrect with my terrible nasal Australian North Queensland accent. But I'm a real fanboy of Epictetus. Born into slavery, and he taught philosophy as a way of life rather than a theoretical, abstract, intellectual discipline, which really is, that's a very different paradigm from what Socrates and Plato were doing. And one of his quotes, and you use this in the book quite a bit, is men are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. And that's so true. So the way I interpret that is, and I'll get you to comment on this to make sure that I got it correct, it's not what happens to you, it's how you interpret it and the labels you put on yourself afterwards. Is that 100%, correct?
100%. And if you talk to someone who doesn't feel this way, the first thing they're going to say is, you can't just change it like that. And to be honest, you can, but you need to work at it usually a little bit, especially if you're new to the concept. You've got to, unless you've greased the wheels a little bit for yourself in terms of understanding and dealing with things that way. It often doesn't come also trying to help change somebody when they're in the heat. Like if they're having a meltdown or something, you go, well, your problem is you're just not facing up to reality properly. It's probably going to make things much worse for them. But in a quiet moment, sometime on the other side, yes, it's how you choose. And labeling it, what people don't get sometimes is that relabeling things in terms that evoke less extremes of emotion can have such a transformative effect. I have, however, had people come up to me after presentations and say, you're asking me to give up living and not have all these great emotions. I'm like, well, no, but thanks for the thought. At least you were listening. But no, I say to them, well, what would you rather have? Pardon me. Less extreme negative emotions and the capacity for greater happiness, or would you like to live like you're on a seesaw going up and down all the time? You've got a choice. And I think that this philosophy of living gives the opportunity to have less roller coasters and more growth and development as a human being.
Exactly. It's not the fact that you're going to feel these emotions or that things aren't going to happen to you. Again, it's what label you put onto it. Now, an example is, as you know, I used to be in the coppers. I did 30 years.
Thank you for your service. Jesus Christ.
But yeah, I'm out on parole. Anyway, 25 years is a life sentence. Yeah, but one of the things that I did, and I was operational for all of it, pretty much. And I was a peer support officer for a little while. And often you get coppers, it's, the warrior mindset is the same in both the police and not just the army either. Incidentally, the Ambos have got it too. They're not admitting it because they've got that real caring side to it. Don't get me wrong, but they're still warriors. Like they still have that can do. Let's go and sort this out. The nurses at ER, all those people. It's the same kind of stuff. But so talking to this, of course, seeing ourselves as saviors, the people that walk in and do stuff. Like we are the saviors, not the saved. People don't understand that there's a relationship there. And so if someone like I was talking to this copper once years ago, who'd come sliding up to me and just needed a chat and said, oh, Matt, I had this suicidal thought, like this, this idea that, suicide went through my head. I said, well, Matt, that means that I'm crazy. Like, because only, and then this copper just immediately started putting all these labels on that thought. And I was like, again, so it's not what happened to you, like, because sometimes you actually can't help your thoughts.
No,
you can't help feeling that. You can't help the emotion, but it's how you interpret it and the label you put on it. Now, if that copper put a label on that thought, thinking that defined them as an insane person, that's really dangerous. The thought wasn't dangerous, Craig.
Yeah.
The label was.
Yeah, it's the judgment. And that's why stigma is such a massive thing. I mean, when I first finished high school, I studied social welfare or community welfare for a number of years, very part-time at TAFE. And I often wondered why I was hanging in there to finish it, but I just thought I'll finish it and never thought anything more of it. till 15 years later, it got me my minor for my degree, which is great. And I would sit through these classes, and a common theme throughout was about stigma, and we've got to reduce the stigma. But then often these people or these theories around the therapy or whatever it was wouldn't make the connection to other parts of our lives and labeling things. And I find that's why Stoicism is another reason, I guess, why I like it, is that it's consistent and comprehensive. I find myself a lot, the type of consulting I do is called change management. I find myself a lot working with communications people. And as soon as someone sets themselves up or tells me they're a communicator, I start looking and wondering, and I take a lot of lessons away from how consistent they actually are at communicating anything. And that to me comes down to interpersonal comms. Can they touch type? Like, these are all basic things. But I've met some comms people that are nightmares and they couldn't type to save their life. And they're two very different skill sets, but you're a communicator. Hey, let's get communicating, man.
Yeah.
Like, and that was something that sort of fed my philosophy when I went, or my work ethic when I went full time in the army. I decided, still don't know if this was the right decision, but I decided to become a radio operator, which is a communicator in the army. And I worked my butt off at this typing, and I've always prided myself on interpersonal skills. And I used to pay my rent based on my capacity to build rapport back when I used to run bars and things like that. So yeah, it's a consistent approach that drifts throughout. And I think that's something we need more of if we want any sort of stability in our lives.
Absolutely. Internal consistency is so important, especially when it's a philosophy. And incidentally, I need to throw in a quick caveat here that, like, if anyone is feeling suicidal and it's happening a lot, please reach out and get some help. It is normal to feel those thoughts, but like if it's happening consistently and you're starting to make plans or anything like that, you're starting to normalize the thoughts, that's a little bit dangerous. Please reach out. Now,
please reach out.
Yeah,
me too. And I guess it's worth saying, don't expect the first professional help you seek to solve it, and don't expect yourself to even get along with the first person, because and I learned this from the Gotcha for Life people. They reckon it takes on average 6 visits to different therapists till you find one that clicks. That's the average that they've researched. So don't be surprised, worried, or concerned if it doesn't work first time. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Really important. Thank you so much for that insight. One of the other things I like about your book is this idea of reclamation. And that is going back to what we were talking about before with this concept of an appeal to your authentic self, whatever that is. Now, the Stoics have it, but it's a really Jewish idea. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm really good friends with the local rabbi, and I attend, I'm not Jewish, but like I attend I attend his lessons regularly. And there is this really deep idea in Judaism that when you sin, so that's your inauthentic self. The most authentic self, from the religious conceptualized, from the religious point of view, the aspect of God in you, the little bit that the Creator put in you, that is your authentic self. Now, there is a connectivity between that infinite part of your personality and the reality of the fact that you are, you're born, you're going to live, you're going to suffer during that thing, and you're going to die. So there is a relationship between those two things. But the most authentic self is that which is made in the image of God, and is that which is reaching for the good and the beautiful. And I got to say, I really, that resonated with me, and this idea of reclamation, which is in the very title of your book. Would you talk to that?
Yeah, most definitely. Often we give our power away in so many different ways, even by apologizing too much. It also came about as a series for me of considering, once I got out of the military, like the military, if I experienced bullying, for example, in the military, I knew how to deal with it. By the time I left, I didn't rise above the rank of digger, because I had 2 trade models. I had the commando trade model and the radio operator trade model, often incompatible and often demanding when I wasn't away on exercise, because serving it as I did eventually at 2nd Commando Regiment, you're constantly either deploying on domestic counterterrorism, you are busy as. So I'd often be fighting for that kind of stuff. But I knew how to deal with bullies. Often it would come from officers above me, and I knew how to sit in an office with them and have it out. Or I knew I had other officers that had my back or whatever. And I knew how to reach out and deal with that stuff. But when I got out into the civilian world, I had to figure this out, and I'd get on these contracts that were paying pretty good money, like certainly compared to what I was making in defence, a lot more. And that was my main outcome, was to keep that cash flowing. If I had a bully who was running things, it was challenging. So I had to really reclaim that part of myself, and I'm not afraid to tell anybody. I remember I had one project manager who was a bully, and it was a female, two females who were the worst I'd worked with. And I came out of the lift one day holding my coffee, and I was just shaking. My hand was because I didn't know if I was going to get yelled at or what was going to happen that day. So I really had to reclaim that part of myself and learn how to effectively assert myself, where I could stand up for myself in a way that, because I believe people like these narcissists who do a lot of the bullying, and bullies, whether they're narcissists or not, they seek out these people who are happy to give away bits of themselves.
Yeah.
And they try to take that, and they try to take it and manipulate it. And so what you need to do as a person, if you've experienced this or whatever, is really back yourself and be prepared to pull those pieces of yourself back and reclaim them in order to put this persona out there. I think that I do a lot of pushing myself out there in a way that I'm always polite, I'm always well-mannered, I very rarely swear, these sorts of things. But I put out who I am in a way that is not only assertive, but don't push me assertive, if you like. Or, push comes to shove, I will tell you to stop that. And I'll tell you in such a term that you'll go, oh shit, I really better not keep doing this. And I've seen it in others, and I've seen other people fall by the wayside since I started putting things out better than I perhaps did when I first got started in my civilian life post defense. And I really is an act of reclaiming and bringing those things back. I looked at REBT and everything it had given me, and the Stoic and all the rest of it, years ago when I used to speak in high schools, and to other groups. I'd share the basics of what's in the book, like the REBT stuff. And I'd notice often it's a simple concept, which we'll get into, but people, that as simple as it is, it's very profound for people. You're asking to do and consider things that may be very challenging just to really get into their system. And so I decided, okay, we've got to give people enough things to be ready for it. I've got to spend, say I do an hour and a half to 2 hour or 3 hour session. I've really got to prepare people for what's going to come, as simple as it may be. I've got to get them ready. And that's where first parts of the book came from. That's where the idea of that this is going to help you reclaim who you are and make you more powerful as a person. And, those ideas of accepting yourself unconditionally, which is already a part of REBT, but how to go about doing it. The strategic versus tactical thinking, the accepting yourself because you can breathe, the being, forgiving yourself, these kinds of concepts to really give yourself back. I mean, I looked at it as a totality of my evolution as a human being and as an adult, and how I've developed. And back in 2001, like I say, I didn't go to East Timor, but the bloke I ended up working for was this fascinating guy who a lot of the grounding and the basis of what I talk about and everything today was forged during that period. And I had unlimited access to books or courses, anything I wanted to do to develop myself. And some of those early books and things, and I used to go to book sales and just come home with a massive bag and just digest all this stuff. But it's what those few main points that are in the book are the ones that stuck, and the ones that I think really enhance getting back what is yours, who you are, and not allowing anybody, keeping yourself safe, but still being prepared to stretch yourself. How do you develop, I suppose it's a form of elasticity, to be able to do all those things and stretch yourself? It's not without its challenges, I promise you that. But how would you also do that given some psychological injuries thrown in for good measure? I mean, it's a constant challenge. But yeah, the whole idea of doing that is something that really can only help people, I think.
Absolutely. And when you're talking about bullying before and its relationship with authenticity, because you see it a lot, and I'll use broader rather than specific workplace stuff. We kind of know bullying when we see it more often than not. Although I don't know how many people I know who think they're being bullied when in fact they're the kind of like, you're the bully, dude. You kind of started this, like someone's just pushing back against you. Anyway,
The easiest place for narcissists to hide, mate, it's as a victim.
Yeah, and that's it. So so we've got this concept, and see I mean, now there's a 2-hour podcast right there, just discussing the relationship, between victim and oppressor, and and that it's not always distinct, and all these things. But one of the things you see in society today with bullying, and you see a lot of what's happening with the emotional blackmail to get to get society to do things that a small minority of people want to do, is fundamentally their compassion and their decency is being weaponized against them. Yeah. And to me, like if you, because people have been asked me before at work, and so Matt, well, what's a bully? What defines it? Is it just a power imbalance? Is it just an abuse of power? Is it just, because there's a power imbalance between everybody all the time, and every human being is going to abuse power, whatever that is, however you define it, at some point or another. To me, the most symbolic marker, is a weaponization of someone's decency against themselves.
Yeah, victimization in many ways.
That's the marker. So if someone's compassionate, you use their compassion against them. Someone's decency, you got, okay, well, you know what I mean?
And don't kid yourself. Anybody sitting out there listening, don't kid yourself. That's what these people seriously sit back and try to do. One of the ways of, which I'm pretty sure I mentioned in the book, one of the ways of developing yourself is looking at what you've got, what you're starting with as a human being. And my mother's, God bless her soul, rest the soul, used to say to me, you're too sensitive, when I was a kid. And it used to make my mates in the army laugh their heads off. They go, bullshit, I go, no, too sensitive. And how there's always a flip side, because everyone's being told at some point in their life, you're too something, to try to use that against you. And this may be the point that some of these people use to try to start this off. But for me, being sensitive, the flip side, the positive of that, is that I'm sensitive to other people's needs. And I try to be sensitive to my own, while simultaneously my psychiatrist tells me I'm dismissive of my symptoms, which is, there's a bit of a survival mechanism in there. But I try to be sensitive to people's needs. And it's incredibly beneficial when I'm in front of a bunch of people presenting, because I can tell if something's not hitting the mark. I can tell so much about just by feeling how they're non-verbally responding, and how things are going over. And I do everything I can to make that a safe, or I've been credited in the last 12 months of making it a culturally safe space, which is incredibly humbling. I was lucky to work, as we discussed earlier, with the Indigenous community, and fantastic people, just really things I've learned that I didn't know that I was doing, which is great. So it's very humbling. And being, you look at what you bring from that space, and then it's not about not bringing that person. The whole play to your strengths is a great idea, but ask yourself, what other skills do I need to develop to complement who that is, so that gift can make it out to the world to benefit others or benefit yourself. But what other things do you need? So I knew in my 20s, the reason I joined the Army Reserve, I knew I needed discipline. I knew I was lagging. I knew I wanted to develop my fitness. I knew these were things, which is a discipline, of course, in itself. But I knew that there were a range of things, and I saw the easiest place to immerse myself in that was, at that stage, the Army Reserve. It really helped to add to those. And of course, full-time Army taught me that in ways I never would have guessed. So yeah, what is a way you can develop these other things that are going to set you up? And it can really come down to, how would I like to be as a person? What is my preference? What are the things that I think I've seen in others that I respect, that I'd really wish I could see within myself?
Absolutely. All right. Well, on that, tell us about what cognitive distortions are, what they are, and how to overcome them.
Great. I really like the term cognitive distortion, because it sounds funny, and it really is its form of psychobabble. And as I say in the book, and every chance I get, it's really designed, the term's really been designed by some very intelligent people to confuse others, maybe. I don't know. Unhelpful patterns of thinking is what they are. And it's a process we go through where we really are confusing ourselves a lot of the time. But yeah, unhelpful patterns of thinking is what they are. Ruminating over things, worrying too much, upsetting.
As soon as you use the word pattern, that explains it to me. So it's a pattern of thinking. It's not a thought. Yeah. It's like, this happens to you, this thought comes in your head, and you run this program time and time and time again.
Yeah, and
we know that that's linked with PTSD. So like, if it's like, well, this happened, I behaved in this way. Oh my God, the regret, the shame, the labeling,
Well, yeah, and regret and shame are some pretty big ones that people tend to, what people think that they're doing. See, what I think is one of the biggest cognitive distortions is when we do something, right? You do something that you're not happy about, and you think by being hard on yourself about it, it's going to improve things, but it doesn't. It makes it harder. You're making your life much harder for yourself by beating yourself up. Because if you go, how could I be so stupid? The way your brain works is it shows you how you could be so stupid, and gives you many more opportunities to be stupid if that's the label you're choosing to use. It's like somebody contacted me once and said, look, I've got to stop being so hard on myself. It's creating and I've got some problems with self-doubt. I go, well, one's creating the other. Because you're being so hard on yourself, telling yourself potentially you're not good enough, of course you're going to doubt yourself, aren't you? Because you're going to answer your own question, or you're going to respond affirmatively to what you're claiming about yourself. If you can learn to forgive yourself and really forgive yourself, go, look, that was not what I wanted, but you've got to label it in ways that's more supportive. So if we start to think within tighter boundaries and label things within more conservative, less emotive things. And there may be plenty of people listening to this that hate conservatism, and that's fine. I'm not here to change or change your views or to sell you too many new ones, but or really don't interested in political views, because what a horrible way to turn off half your potential people you could help if they think you're one way and they particularly hate that way. So
yeah, exactly.
let's let everybody be who they're going to be. But if you think within tighter bounds, let's call it tighter bounds, and you think, okay, well, something's not terrible, horrible, and awful. It's just not what I would have preferred. And if you start to, or rather than I was so angry, I was so pissed off, maybe if you were just a bit upset, or I was a bit peeved, even there's a lot of these old fashioned terms that are really good for bringing it down. And you start to think in those spaces, it makes it so much easier. And treat yourself. One of my favorites, Jordan Peterson, he's great. Treat yourself as someone you're tasked with looking after. Now, if you tip that top of mind when you go to try to review something that wasn't the way you wanted it to be, you're not going to beat yourself up, are you? You're going to go, well, we got to do better here. I've got to pick this up. So, yeah, we do a lot of silly things. There's always looking for someone to blame is a classic. But then there's always the people who are never wrong. It was never them. That's like a reverse narcissistic approach, which is still part of narcissism, where they always try to shirk responsibility. They always think they're going to get blamed, but they're more of a pain in the bum than you think they're going to be. It goes on, and I make people really aware of these at the start, because I want people to be able to identify something within themselves. Now, if they're not prepared to, if the ego isn't prepared to think around and admit to things, I just say, and this is an old self-improvement one, but it always works. Think about someone that you know who might be like this. If you're perfect, what about those other people out there? Try to get them to start using what you're sharing at the very least.
And I mean, if you think spot on, if you think of the old adage, treat your neighbor as yourself, you see, if you're treating yourself not like someone to look after, like someone that's someone that should feel shamed and bullied and all those kind of things, and you've got all these issues within yourself, but you're treating your neighbor as you would yourself. Well,
would you treat your neighbor that badly?
So that means you got to get that. You got to get it. Like, you got to get that relationship right. Like, and you've got to get what is the higher ideal first. There's so much wrapped up in these tiny little adages.
One of the problems for some practitioners in this space is that the first thing they start telling you is that you need self-love, man. You need to love yourself. And for many people out there, that's the most abhorrent thought they could ever have. Or they're going to go, oh, you're just some tree hugger or something. You're going to send me a teddy bear. Like, give me a break. And so let's start with something we can achieve, like acceptance, self-acceptance. You don't have to like yourself, but you goddamn well better accept yourself, warts and all. Okay, you don't have too many warts, but all those things, you need to just accept it. You need to be able to go, great. Yeah. So if someone throws something at you or says something mean to you, whatever, you go, whatevs. That's all good. I accept me, man. This is a reflection of you on me, of you. You're trying to put that on me, but it's a reflection of you. And often it is. I mean, but if you can get past that stuff, I think self-acceptance is something that needs to be used before we can start trying to love ourselves. I mean, I don't even bring up self-love in my work. I just say, let's just accept, because I don't want to I'm not trying to curtail my language. There's so much to do with trying to get people to accept themselves that I haven't even gotten around to. I'm good enough. God damn it, people like me, or whatever the saying used to be.
Well, the other thing is, Craig, that's linked with the authenticity. So if someone has actually looked deep into themselves and they've seen something that they don't like, they find out something they don't like about themselves, and they've recognized a real bit of like Jungian darkness in themselves, they go, well, that's kind of not lovable. Like, how and why could you love that? Like you said, it's more of an acceptance thing. Like, I went to this job in the last couple of months before I left the police, and I won't give too many details to give it away, but like this, oh God, I'm still talking about it years later. It was genuinely really tragic. This, I just want to choose my words here carefully so I don't. This lady was punishing herself, and she was in a really, really, really toxic relationship where this person was just clearly just exploiting this person, using her totally instrumentally, and getting her to humiliate herself. Honestly, it was so toxic. Anyway, so I went there with a crew. I was a sergeant when I finished up, so I got the boys to arrest this guy, like bind him. So okay, guys, take this peanut away, throw him in the watch house. I'll do all the typing, and I'm sitting there talking to this woman who's just like, and it was like she's homeless, so she was squatting this place, and she just collapsed, Craig, just like, she's just bawling, and she was just surrounded by all these markers of I can't say what it was, but all these markers of things that she'd done wrong were all in front of her, like just constantly all around her, and the things that she had participated in, that this guy had kind of like encouraged her to do. And I said to her too, and I actually said, like, because I really listened to her, like, and I spent a bit of time talking to this lady, and I needed to take a statement off her anyway to get enough information for the charges I was going to whack on this bloke. And I said to her at the end, I said, little sister, why are you doing this to yourself? And she looked at me and she goes, Sarge, because I deserve it. I deserve it. Wow. And she had done, like, and she revealed something that she had done in her life that really was kind of that she should have felt ashamed about. But it wasn't definitive. Like, it was this, without going into the precise details, like it was, it involved the death of someone that she loved, that she did actually contribute to, partially unwittingly. And she believed that it defined herself as a person. So you've got a link with all these like really positive things. And again, you kind of cover this in the book, and that's why I like it. So it's like, okay, so it's an appeal to authenticity, but authentically what? Am I authentically a turd? Like, am I authentically a housebreaker? Like, is my authentic self, and if you look at some of the, like, because I used to, deal with the sex offenders, some of those people just genuinely couldn't help themselves. So it was kind of the way they were wired. So is that their authentic self, Craig? So what's the authentic self here? Is the authentic self the voice in the head going, don't do that, and this appeal to this higher good? Or is it like, so, what's the authentic self? And then this idea of like, is that, what's worth loving here? Yeah. How can I love myself? Like, love myself. Oh, what? If you knew me, like, because basically what this lady was saying was, look, if you knew me and you knew what I'd done, and like she told me what she'd done, so I had some idea of what she'd done, you wouldn't think I would be worth loving.
No.
And
well, it comes down to the old thing, and you hear it a bit in Christianity. Love the sinner but not the sins, or the person but not their actions. And I really believe that people aren't their actions. Often you get told you're the sum total of this or that or something else. You are you, a fallible, worthwhile human being. You exist. Okay, you have one human's worth. It doesn't go up, doesn't go down. This whole notion of I feel worthy or worthless. People have been, even before terms like self-esteem came into the game, and back in, I only got to watch Monty Python or those old medieval comedies and things about how I'm not worthy and all this sort of business. And it's people have been grappling with a sense of worth forever. But what if you were just one human's worth? It doesn't go up. You're equal in terms of every other human on the planet in terms of your humanity. You are just as much a human being as every other human being out there. So that's should be the yardstick, I think. There's no such thing as a level playing field, and nor should there be. But I think people need to get past this idea, because it becomes something you can give away to other people. And often people, and predominantly women, many years ago, thankfully, not anymore, but it still probably happens in some, and some for some ladies, but they're told to get their self-esteem from relationships. Well, relationships can go haywire all the time. And especially if you're with some kind of a jerk or a nasty person, your relationship, your feelings about yourself are going to be destroyed. And and it can be like the wind blows. You can never control that stuff. So it is really challenging. But you've really got to be able to separate yourself from your actions and yourself from your possessions, especially, as well as from your good deeds also, and know that, well, I'm this person who does these things, but that's not who I am.
First, can you give us just general insights from what you've learned, and secondly, where can we get your book and how can we get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So some insights, I guess. Things get easier the more you keep doing them, I suppose. Yeah, you're not useless, you're not horrible, you're not awful, unless of course you choose to buy in and believe it. And when you realize that that's just a comment, or that's just the statement, or that's just something that somebody else may have attempted to put in your head. The same with guilt. I think guilt is a tool that's used against the other people. If we talked earlier about weaponizing people's good qualities against them, guilt's one that just weaponizes people against themselves anyway. I got to a point, one of the first biggest insights I had in my early 20s when I moved out of home was I realized that guilt, because my dad used to guilt trip me from a certain age to try to get me to go to church. I didn't want to go, and he guilt tripped me. And I realized that guilt tripping, and I don't think Dad knew what he was really doing, but I think guilt tripping is a tool of manipulation. And when people start to do it, and you spot it really quickly when you're good at it, you go, whatever. Because you got to come back to being yourself. I think if you stop trying to be yourself and back yourself, I was on one of my favorite interviews I did last year on a podcast. They said, how would you help blokes? Because it was a men's mental health podcast. They said, how would you help blokes develop confidence? I said, fucking back yourself. Be prepared to back yourself. Have conviction in who you are. It doesn't feel great to start with. It's scary. It's going to a place you may never have been. But if you don't bloody well go there, you're never going to get the wins. And you will get the wins because you'll stand up and people will go, that person is somebody I can respect. And one of the great things about influence in life, we never know how far our influence will go. And it's one of my favorite ones is we've got to get more vocal about our mental health and talking about the challenges that we have. Because if you open up around a bunch of blokes at the pub having a beer and somebody new comes along that night who's someone's mate and they hear what you have to say and you might have gotten a bit emotional or, shared more than perhaps what some people feel comfortable with. At least one person there may be, and I say maybe, because it may not necessarily always happen, but one of them may go, gee, I respect that person so much. That has inspired me. And that might help them to prevent themselves from going too far one day if they do have suicidal ideations or something similar. That may give them some sort of strength or comfort, and you never know how far that will go. So don't be afraid to be yourself, to back yourself, and to give it all you got. Because really, what life is if we don't, and for the people that we care about. You can get my book on every digital platform, believe it or not, just about. I haven't done an audio book yet, but I will. But you can, in Australia, the cheapest place to get it from is from my website, reclaimyourbook.com. Play obviously on the title. And it's, but also people can buy it if they're in the US or whatever that way also. And you can get in touch with me via all the socials. I'm Change Seminars on Instagram. I'm Craig Ball, men's mental health speaker on Facebook. I run a men's walk. I started it a bit over a year ago, called the Central Coast Men's Walk and Talk. If you're a male or have an important person or male that you care about on the Central Coast, please let them know. The Central Coast Men's Walk and Talk on Facebook. Yes, this is the book. It just needs to shrink down a bit. Oh, there we go. Look, you get a bit of a video from me talking to you as you can see, that bookshelf's a lot neater than the one behind me currently.
And for the listeners, it's reclaimyourbook.com. And if you just Google Craig Ball, B-A-L-L, Reclaim Your Power, you'll find it.
Yeah, they even have it on Booktopia, which is one of my favorite places to get books from. But you buy it off me, it's cheaper. The shipping's cheap, everything's cheaper about it, and I'll sign it I'll dedicate it to you. So I wrote it in such a way that every chapter will in time become a book. So the next one I think I'm going to do on continuing to fight against the self-esteem myth, and it's probably going to be called the self-esteem trap, and it's going to go into more reasons why you should accept yourself unconditionally and how important that is, because I think it's too prevalent. The disease of self-esteem is too prevalent in our communities not to do something.
That's spot on, because like, I talk to a lot of people about this, and I remember actually when this self-esteem movement first came out, like in the late 80s, early 90s, people were saying, oh, you gotta, you just, and I was like, well, no.
Well, that's when it first started to rear its head here, or become a lot more popular here. It really started to come to prominence in the 60s and 70s in the US,
Yeah,
particularly with the rise of consumerism, because
yeah.
it's all about getting stuff for the self and for me.
Again, no coincidence that that's going on, but like, people are confident because they achieve things. They don't achieve things because they're confident, and it doesn't matter how small the achievement is. Like you can, Jordan Peterson, if you clean up your room,
it's a win. It's a win.
that's an achievement. Like seriously,
Yeah.
like, we shouldn't mock those things. We shouldn't put that, mate. If you just start writing your book, even if it, you just, whatever it is, small thing that you do, that's going to give you the confidence to take on the next thing.
If you start your book, just think how great things will be, because I can share honestly with anybody who's ever written a book. If you write a book or thought of, just finish it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but when you give that to somebody or sell it to somebody or somehow network with that book, it's the most amazing tool, because you're now giving something of yourself away that's so much more comprehensive or pervasive than you could have ever given with a little card with your name on it. And it has this incredible giving back to yourself as well as giving to them at the same time. So yeah, that's why when you told me your mate stole the copy of my book, I was like, oh, I'll get one in the mail to you.
He did.
I hope he enjoys it,
He did. Just to give some context for the readers, Craig sent me a copy of his book ages ago, for me to read, obviously to critique. And a friend of mine, and he's a very good chance he's going to listen to this. You know who you are. Liberated
the book.
liberated the book and said that he was going to return it, and he never did. You know who you are, and you may live a long way away, but I know where you live. And I never got it back, so it had the humiliating thing. Like I had to ring up Craig and say, "Oh, Craig, mate, I made him stole your book."